Hello, I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coops, and welcome to Journey into an Unknown World. This was originally my radio show on webtalkradio.net, but now I'm doing this on SoundCloud, and so I hope you'll bear with me here and listen to me in terms of my talk here, which is about abortion. As probably some of you already know, I wrote a book, Pro-Life, Pro-Choice, Pro-Spirit, back in the 1980s when the issue about abortion first came up. And of course now we have the country divided by states, some for abortion and some against it. And so I felt it would be a good time to actually dig back into history and talk about what women have been through, while also asking men to understand that they've been under the burden of responsibility for an entire 3,500 years of recorded history. While it's very easy to assess today and come to opinions, we need to see what caused us to follow our pathway to reach this point where we are all in controversy as to what is right to do about a pregnancy. As a person myself, being female and having been pregnant and having 4 sons, I can also tell you that, like so many women in this world, I was abused and raped too on 2 occasions. And in my life, there was no choice but to make a decision. But I'm not talking about that now. I want to go back into the Egyptian times, and I want to speak about how it was for women of those times. It was understood by men in the early part of the early Egyptian culture arising that women were soft and gentle and tender and were available for men to release their stress, their anxieties, their worries. So it wasn't unusual to have what you would call today prostitute houses, where the men would go and have their pleasures. Now, the women who were in those places were in some ways highly admired for the fact that they had skills that were, shall we say, not done normally by the wife. And that is not any different today. There were many women back in the Egyptian times who only loved their husband for 1 night or 2 until they were pregnant. Once they were pregnant, the sexual activity didn't seem to be so important to her man because he was going off to the local prostitution place to enjoy himself there with drink and wine and other men as well. So you have seen movies, I'm sure, where actors have played the parts in pretending they're having an orgy. But we have to say to you that back in those days, there were indeed orgies, a great many of them, because there was no judgment about getting pregnant, but rather more judgment about status. And so if a man did not have sons, it felt like a kind of disgrace. So to spread his seed around meant even if he found some woman who was available but not his wife to produce a child, then that child, being a son, would be brought into the household. While there was controversy and competition between women in many different ways, there was a total acceptance that if any woman had a child, that they would congregate together, these women who had had different children by a particular man, to produce a boy or 2 or 3 as a backup in case something happened to the eldest. To continue the line, the women's job was to make sure all these children that were born were fed, clothed, to a point educated according to the standards of the time. Education didn't necessarily mean to read, but if you were of the upper class, then you would write according to the signs of the time, and you would learn to put down whatever information you had for your servants, who would be having that read to them by the main librarian of the household. We say librarian because this person would keep all the records of all notes passed from one person to another. You have to understand that even in those times, people travelled far and wide on carts and horses and boats and so on. And so messages often took a long time to come. So in every household, there was always someone who was educated to read the notes, and sometimes they were more educated than the person that employed them. So how did they get educated? Well, they were taken into service as a young child, male or female. They were tested in a variety of different ways, and if they were found to have the understanding, the mind to be able to recall and remember incidents, they were turned into little historians. But in those days, history was not so important as more about who owned what, who did what, and what was going to happen next. So news was passed from place to place, orders were passed from place to place, and in this process, sometimes women were sent to various places to provide happiness and pleasure to men in various ways, including having a baby. So all these babies that were born in other parts of the world where, shall we say, the Egyptians, the Romans, and the Greeks had conquered, there were many children born there who never saw the homeland of their father. Of course, there were many wars, and men fought at many times for land, for produce, and whatever it was they wanted. And in the process of doing that, women were left without guidance, without support. And if there wasn't enough money, they ended up lonely on the streets as prostitutes for the lower companies of the world. In other words, the men who were the soldiers or the millers, shoe repairers and so on. And these men tried to climb the ladder of importance and success, obviously failing many times, but in the process abusing women. And so more and more women became lower in their societal structure until over time they were little thought of. So by the time the Romans were conquering the world, and Aga Khan and those kinds of people were doing their thing, between those two periods, there was a tremendous amount of abuse for women. At the same time, religion was transforming itself. It wasn't a Catholic faith at that time. It was simply a belief in the power of God to control your life. So many gods were considered powerful. And women would go and try and get some kind of help from a god if they were pregnant. And if they could not find an answer, and they were in their third trimester and there was no support, it would not be unusual for them to choose death, to kill themselves and kill their baby, which would be far better than coming into the world with a child and doing nothing and getting nothing and starving to death later. These kinds of horrible things were not really spoken of in the way of the upper class of the times. It was known it happened, but nobody wanted to be involved. And so the more noble people did not help the lower people. This was the way of the world for many centuries. Now let us go into the formation of religions through conquering. One can understand that if you were praising some god who was in charge of vegetation, and a man arrives and tells you this is only a demigod and has no power because there is only one God, and that one God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and that you must put aside your belief in this demigod and praise this one God, and if you did not, then you would die, was pretty relevantly new to society by the turn and rise of Christianity. And as we know, the Vatican, which was the all-powerful part of Rome, was telling all the soldiers how to believe and how to think, and to make sure that their seed was fertile so that they would produce more babies, so that Rome would be greater for more men. Now that wasn't a new idea. They'd had this idea, the Greeks had it, the Egyptians had it, and other races, of course, that were entwined by these great powers also had it, because mankind wants to have friends and womankind want to have love and support and security. And so it was that in many ways women were taken and abused, and if they produced, as we said earlier, too many girls, then that was a problem. But let us talk in the overview from a spiritual point of view. If men come down to the world and they fight over certain things such as land, conquering capitals and taking buildings and all the wealth that was in a country back to their own country, leaving a country annihilated, one could understand that the only real upstanding citizens of the time left to repopulate would be the lower class, the women, who had been abused and misused by the men who had conquered them. And they, leaving, had not taken their children with them, being considered bastards, were forgotten. But the mothers didn't forget what these children's fathers were. And when their children were born, and if they were sons, they introduced to those children the idea that they could be a great man one day, that they could fight for survival, that they could fight for their property and become rich and wealthy. And so it was that mankind began to realize that there was more to life than being a servant and saying yes, no, 3 bags full to whoever has the money and whoever is dominating their country. In the beginning, when Egyptians, Romans and Greeks flooded their soldiers into a country that had no warriors, their battles were trivial and soon lost, and they were absorbed into the cultures of the countries that took them and brought them into their ways of living life. So those countries were given new religions and philosophies to follow. If they did not follow the rules, then they were murdered, basically. Their lives were taken away because they were more of a problem alive than dead. So violence was back, and it was inevitable that consciousness would come into the world, and now we want to bring in the understanding of divine essence. We have talked a lot about how there is friction in the universe. You should all understand that that friction has to be on earth as well. After all, if you had everything either all negative or all positive, with no battles going on between the two, you would sink into oblivion. Acceptance would destroy you all, and you would no longer procreate. You'd be vacillating, musing in your comfort zone of either being very negative with nothing happening, miserable, probably drinking alcohol and such life things, or you would be extremely, shall we say, afraid of change, trying to live the way everybody else expects you to live. But rising up out of that negativity came those children who were programmed, not in this life, not on this planet, but in the spirit world, to be born as leaders, to stimulate a new realm of existence, to begin a new life cycle for all of mankind. And out of that came the coding from the oneness of search, seek, find, and use, and become productive. Not to maim and spoil life, but to nurture it. But it took 3,500 years of the Piscean Age to bring mankind into understanding that religion put some rules down. And religion was supposed to teach people to value life. But what religion did was to clean up in some ways the war factors. So when soldiers came to fight, they praised God, Alleluia, and said, please let us be the winners. And then on another hill far away was another battle, another thing going on, and they too were doing the same, please let us be the winners. And ultimately the winners became losers, and the losers became winners. And we say to you, the flip in understanding by losing awakened a greater need, desire to succeed. Of course, when we fail and succeed, we are taught on earth to think about how well or how badly we've done. But in the oneness, we see both as important. For if a child acts badly, then it tests the parents to find a better way to understand their child, rather than discipline them, lock them in a room, and pretend they don't exist, which the forefathers did. While the mothers were crying in another room, wishing they could go and save their child, but unable to, because their child would be suffering further had they interfered. So in the upper classes of the world of the time, the woman produced a baby and passed it over to a nanny who would take care of her child, and she would only see that child once a month. So the idea of being a mother was not a happy one. But the child was taken often to see the father, who was proud and who told his son, you must do this and you must do that, and you must study and you must become the thing I need you to be, the leader of my world when I die. And considering that death in those years was usually around 40 or younger, because one was at war, and bearing in mind that often sons went to war as young as 12, you could see that the male species of humankind didn't last very long. And the women, they were quietly at the edge of battles, waiting to go and pick up the bodies or heal the wounded. And in the process of that, often caught diseases themselves. Cholera, things like this were rampant because bodies fell in water and rotted there, and yet they were drinking water that was rotten because they needed water, had no idea how to purify it. So boiled water often had germs in there too, and that affected the digestive system, and so often great plagues occurred where thousands died. And you might say how sad that was, that so many had come to the earth to bring enlightenment and yet found themselves being cut off, isolated, forgotten, and then dying. How would this be helpful to the spirit world? Well, the truth is that every person that comes into embodiment is a spirit, and their job is to try and live as best they can in the times of the way the world is, and bring to the world some kind of conflict that would cause mankind to question their existence and to then evolve by finding a new direction, a new purpose, a new understanding. When you look back through the centuries now of recorded history, we are sure that you can all see that there have been so many wars and so many deaths, even up to the last ones of this last century. And you would say of all of this, we have come so far in our understanding of ourselves as human beings. We have learned to be technical, we have learned to develop medicine, we have learned to have political ages, and the list goes on. And so you have. And in the process of all of this, you can look back and see in the last 100 years, you have gone from gas lights to electricity to computers and more. Do you feel good about that? Are you happy as a man that you have a company or some business that you are the leader of? If you are the woman, the wife of a man, are you content? Are you fulfilled by your man? Are you happy with your children? We will say generally no, 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 and no again, because you are still thinking like a man and woman from 3,500 years ago. You are still thinking like a Piscean of that age. You are still saying, I want more money. You are still saying, I want my children to take care of me when I'm old and decrepit. You are still saying, I want more money to buy more toys. I want to go to more countries and get some of their toys and bring them back to my country for me. And when I have it, I'll tell people where I got it. And when I get those people saying I want it too, I'll say, well, I'll get you more at a price. Well, you can see trade here, can't you? But you can also see stress, dishonesty, abuse, misuse, broken promises. You can also see ministers praying on your behalf that whatever umbrage, whatever awful situation you're in, they will sort it out for you by praying to God for you to get you saved so that you will be happy in this world. Well, the miracles come, but not in that style, not in that way. You see, the coding of that person from their soul vibration is active. And the soul structure coding that we've also written about in the books that we have put out with Dr. Margaret, we wish you to understand that you can see that you are here for a purpose, and this soul structure coding is activated within you. So let us come now to the issue of women and pregnancy in your modern time. We have explained that throughout the Piscean age, women have been the plaything of men, or women have been the ones who toil to save the men. Now, we must look at today. Women have finally found their independence, but they do not feel independent because underneath, in their consciousness of their learning in this world of everyday experiences, still see themselves as subjects of the men. In other words, some countries will say of themselves, I am not able to survive and make money. I have no education, so I have to find a man who I'll marry, give him children, and then he'll give me a roof over my head, food on my plate, and take care of me. So an arranged marriage occurs. This is still going on in many countries that are poor and suffering. A good marriage means both families will in some way benefit. But it doesn't necessarily come that way, because maybe the woman is not happy with her husband And maybe he abuses her and hits her. Or maybe she yells and screams at him and he leaves her alone and there's no new children. And the older generations are constantly saying, where are our grandchildren? Where is our grandson? Why aren't you having a baby? And the woman is saying, well, I'm on the pill. I'm protecting myself. I don't want to have a baby in a time when there is no food, when my husband is abusive to me, when I am not free to be who I want to be. And then the family says to that woman, then you are disowned. You will be separated and divorced from this man because you are not giving him a child. And the woman would say, he hasn't come to the bedroom to service me. It's not my fault. And the parents would say to their son, go make love to this woman and bring forth a child. And he says, I'm afraid. What if it's a girl? There's no value in a girl. I'll have a mistress instead. And so a mistress is found, and as luck would have it, gives him a child, and it's a girl. Oh dear, a girl. You're not good enough. I'm not going to take care of you. I'll say it's not my child. It belongs to someone else. The woman is heartbroken. She's been promised some food and some comfort, and now she's discarded like a piece of old rags of clothes, not needed anymore. That was a scenario in the 1800s. There were many women who were trying to climb the social ladder, and there were many men who were forced to marry women they did not love, and to do their rightly thing as husband, go in there, do what he has to do, and leave. And she was left to hope she was pregnant. In the lower classes, they were servants to the upper classes. If they were well thought of in the family, by the upper class family, then they were taken care of. The family would pay for their children's of the servants to make sure they were fed as well. And this was in every country, even in India. If a white person had to have a nanny, then the entire family of the nanny were employed. And this was the social structure, and it worked for a while. And so the lower supplied comfort to the upper, and the upper supplied security. And so we had a social structure around the world that was allowing the world to heal and recover from the enormous negativity of years of pain and suffering. But it didn't last long, because religion started to judge. And when religion was made the only religion at first, ultimately there were other countries that said, this is not acceptable to me. And so there was a battle of religions, and as we all know, the Catholic faith won. So when you rise up and you think that you are in the hands of God under a Catholic faith and go to confession, are you really confessing to God or to a man in a cloth who has been defined as the spokesman by a church that is organized in such a way to make you believe you are safe? Is that priest going to help you when you're pregnant to have a baby and rear it and pay for all the things that that baby needs? You know well the answer to that. And you can understand that through the 100 years, from the 1800s to the 1900s, there was great umbrage in women. They wanted to rise up and speak for themselves. And so it was an enormous step forward to achieve the ability to vote. But at the same time, there were other people rising up about the religions of the world. Judgment. If you're a Hindu, your religion can't be anything as good as a Catholic. So there was conflict again. Religions, battles again, like before, only this time in offices and in buildings, people doing destructive things. And people suffered and people died. And that moved forward into now 1900s. More battles, more wars, and as you see, more men giving women more babies, but in a time when consciousness had moved to independence. So men would arrive, I'll give you all sorts of things, I'll promise you the moon, and the woman, thinking he really meant it, then surrendered her beautiful body to him, only to find later she is pregnant and he's nowhere to be seen. And this was an awakening time when women were considered whores if they were even a lady who got pregnant out of wedlock. And it happened. And so that child was farmed away and hidden away and brought up by someone else, and nobody knew. And what a dichotomy for the mother who knew she had a baby somewhere in the world and could never see it, never touch it, never hold it. And when that dilemma was addressed, there was only one alternative solution: abortion. Now, abortion was nothing new, because throughout the centuries women had been using herbs, doing different things to lose children. But with the wars going on, World War I and World War II in the early 1900s, there wasn't a knowledge about the herbs. It was lost. And so women were going to other women who were interfering with the private parts. There were many women who bled to death. There were many women who did lose their babies but could never get pregnant again. There were many women who were traumatized emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually as these surgeries were done, because there was no anesthesia. There was nothing to stop the pain. There was nothing to make them unconscious. They suffered terribly. And in the process of losing that baby, were victimized and chastised by the church. And yet the church would not help them, because they were also a sinner and someone who should be cast out. Where would you go? What would you do? How would you survive? There was no social security money. There was no one opening a Bordeaux place for mothers to come and be taken care of during the pregnancy, especially if you were a street person. So there were people who were on the street, who were whores, who had many babies. And fortunately, in their way of the time, babies got ill and died. Otherwise they couldn't feed them. They couldn't keep them. So there were many orphans on the street. We're sure you've seen movies about that, and you know about it, and yet you don't consider this when you think about having sexual pleasure. You don't consider that your child in a modern way will be a latchkey child, because you're a mother now fighting for your freedom and your independence, which you should do, because your soul coding makes sure you do, get you to work and evolve as an independent woman. But when you have that child, where is that child while you're working? Who is that child being influenced by? You have seen street gangs amongst children and violence emerge. You have seen a repetition of the Piscean age. It's not new. It's been going on throughout every century for 3,500 years. Children have wandered the streets, ganging up together, fighting one another for food, for coin, or for anything else they could get, and holding their positions by threatening one another constantly all the time. And those children growing up to be violent men. And those violent men setting up scenarios, reasons to go to war and cause some kind of change in their country. Revolution. You can look at the French Revolution. You can look at other revolutions across the world. You can see it happening in your lifestyle and time in Africa, in India, in the Middle East, in Russia, and so on. Have you learned yet that life is precious and that man and woman are the divine creation? Woman is capable of bringing through into this world divine love. Divine love accepts truth of self, accepts truth of life, and gives woman the opportunity to nurture self and others. Divine wisdom comes through man. His instinct to investigate, find more things, has been consistent throughout the 3,500 years, but it has been done in pain and suffering, by domination, by control and manipulation of all, no matter where they have been, no matter who they are. Societal structure has led them to say, I have to fight for my existence. And in fighting, I am assuming that I am making a wise choice. So, man and woman come together, believing they've made a wise choice to be together and share and have babies and have happy families, until suddenly there's a rising up. There's people saying, it can't be this way, it has to be that way. What should it be? Where should it be? How should it be? Why should it be? And so on. Education has brought mankind into an understanding that there is much more to learn. Yet at the same time, fear of new things stimulates mankind to look back at the past and to say, I remember. You were saying recently, of all property, I remember when I could buy a house for $35,000. Now you can say of your house, I remember when I could get 3,500 millions or whatever it is for my house, and I'm really rich, till you try and sell it and find you're making a loss because the market's dropped and you're now in debt and you can't buy another house. So has anything really changed? Whether it originally cost $1 and now costs $3,000? The battle is still there within you, that you are desiring more. There's nothing wrong in desiring more. But if it comes at a price where it makes you sad and miserable, or where it forces you to work 49 hours extra than the normal 40 hours a week, you are exhausted, you are tired, you are not there to think about your family, you are not supporting your children, the children that you got, that you were made to have because a law says you cannot have an abortion. So why would we talk about it's okay to have an abortion? We are going to tell you from a spiritual point of view the truth, and we hope you will listen to it, and we hope you will share it. The first thing to understand is that no baby is born without first having done a bonding ceremony with the mother-to-be in the spirit world some 7 generations before they are actually born. In other words, when you hear someone say, I am the 7th son of the 7th psychic of the 7th family member and so on, what you're actually hearing is a reminder that it does take 7 generations of movement and change and alteration for the next child to be born into this world, because they are programmed to deal with the future, not the past. Why would that be from a spiritual point of view? Because spiritual energy must rise and fall. And when it rises and falls, and we will do this for you so you to understand, when one is rising, the other is falling. And there is a great space between. And in that time, there is a great understanding of the light and the dark. But then when that understanding is awakened, there must be a change. And so the dark rises up as the light descends. There's a point of connection when the light and the dark on earth manifest harmony. For a brief time, there is peace and quiet and spiritual growth. And then, when that is acquired, again arises the friction, the change. And those who have come down from the highest must come into the lowest, and those from the lowest must rise to the highest. And so the dark becomes the dominant and the light is lower. But what happens here? The dark transitions to light, right? And the light transitions to dark. So the dark is the weight of life, and the light is the birth of unification, of oneness. So all this is going on all the time. Now, if you think about history and you look back, you will see this. If you are a student of history, study how religions have caused men and women to be controlled in belief systems that are not correct. Look for the times when you can see the dark and the light unifying, bringing to the world great growth. You can see it many ways and many times throughout the last 3,500 years, but especially in the 1800s to the 2000s. In those 2,000 years of life, the last 2,000 years, we say, of the Great Persian Age, was an internal battle going on between the light and the dark. So there was a lot of this going on. And as it was going on, this Persian Age was beginning to realize that the people in embodiment need to evolve and ascend away from the old ways. So those last 2,000 years particularly were a transformation of going into the sharing of land, the exploring of nature, of mankind, and so people got in boats and travelled to find the end of the world. And of course, the centuries passed, and people learned there were other people that looked different, smelled different, the 5 senses were heightened, and people integrated because they wanted to know more about one another. But as they learned, friction happens. And as that friction happens, separation happens. And once again, we have conflict. Where are we going? What are we doing? We don't know. We're exploring. We're finding more. And oh, we've lost so much. What did we lose? What did we not learn here? What did we not understand? Time to be a recluse. Think on it. Time to hurry up and find more. You can see that you're in that kind of age now. And of course, with friction and battles, and here's a mini war with Russia and all these things that are happening around the world, and people are dying and living and moving and so on. Welcome to this. Welcome to friction. But are you learning to unify? Are you learning to share? You want 1,000 years of peace. You want this to be the unity. And so, the spirit world is sending down onto this planet new spirits who are light, bright, who want to be an embodiment, but they're innocent. And if you teach them how to be dark and miserable, they will rebel because they don't want that dark and light. They want light. They want peace. They want harmony. So when you hear your young ones talking now, they talk about cleaning up the world, cleaning up the oceans, growing more trees. They are not interested in where you've been and what you've done and how you've done it and why you've done it. They are walking away from you. And the more you try and dominate your child, the more they'll say, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to run away from home. And then they go and live on the street. And they gang up with other people. And they fight. Why? Because they've learned that from you, a parent, you, an ancestor, back 7 generations for survival. They've learned. And what are they doing for you, looking on? They are showing you the history of the Piscean age. And you've had people coming out and bombing people and shooting people with guns. And you say, how could they do that? How could an Egyptian, how could a Roman or Greek man come into a town, rampage, set fire to houses, kill everyone? Do you see? It's a modern version that they are saying, I'm running away from what you're trying to make me do. I want to be different. But if they've learned only to watch violence and aggression with mother and father because they're drinking and they're doing drugs, they're in the negative side. They're going down. While others are rising up out of that saying, because my parents did this, I'm not. I'm leaving. I'm running away. I'm finding light. So that's life. And when you think about life, it must be appreciated that each individual has their own soul structure coding, that each individual has watched 7 generations of their ancestors preparing a way. We gave, through this woman, a book to you. Donald Trump, The Enigma of Society. That book was written not about the man and politics, but about his history, the 7 generations that made it possible for him to become a president and to stir up the waters of this conflict that we've been talking about now, to make you all understand that you cannot carry over the energies of battle and pain and suffering from the Piscean age into what is now the birthing of the great Aquarian age. It cannot be allowed to happen for the oneness. For the oneness needs unity in order for these 2 great energies of the oneness to come together to bring peace. And so the battle will continue. You will be doing this for a while until you find time to touch. Touching is unification, sharing. When you reach out in such a way with your varieties of different beings in terms of character, personality, the coding from your soul structure, and the society that you've grown up in, you are looking at what was, and now you're saying, I want something that is new and different. So these children are pioneers of the future to lay the foundation stone of knowing and accepting one another. And so you have seen the breeding into marriage. It's happened before. No one is pure white, pure blue, pure black, or any other yellow, whatever color you want to use. It is not important. What is important is how the histories are integrated in the DNA to allow generations in the future to be able to say of themselves, we are similar. Not the same, but similar. Our genes are similar. Our ancestry is similar. We have all been the children, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren, if you like, of those who have fought in battles before. And we have that coding within us, and we say of it, we are here to find peace, not war. So now let us come to the understanding of the new idea here, yet again, that every baby is sacred. We will say to you of this, that in the first trimester, it is the mother that grows the baby in the womb. There is no spirit present in the womb. We will say it this way. When an ova is fertilized, it becomes a zygote. The zygote breaks into three parts. One part is the placenta that adheres to the wall of the womb. The second part is to be the brain that grows according to the mother's energy that she gives to the ova to make sure it grows. It grows a brain, that second part. And when that brain is grown, then the third part of the zygote grows the body. And it takes 3 months for that to happen. And in that 3 months, it is only when the zygote has now become firmly the placenta adhered to the wall of the womb, and that the brain has fully grown to a point where it knows the next step in growing the body, and then the body is activated to grow. The mother's energy makes it grow. And when the baby is about this big in the womb, the spirit that is to be that baby will join with that body, with the mother in her aura. They blend their spirit to spirit, and become one. Now, this is a physical form of what was done in the spirit world long before any of the ancestors had been born yet. There are services, if you like, of unity with great masters where spirits come together and share their hopes and dreams of their evolvement in different ways, different modalities. And everyone has codings according to the universal consciousness. And so they're great parties, great ascension, great fun, great integration, not in the way you think of parties, but in energy. And so 7 generations of your ancestors were born before you could come along. And you are there to continue their journey, and you will have babies who are there to continue your journey. And they too have watched you when you were watching your mother getting pregnant. So you see, you already knew your children long before they were ever born, because it's already set up that they will come to you. So if you happen to have a relationship in these modern times where you have been a modern woman enjoying yourself with men and find yourself suddenly pregnant and wondering why it's happened and what are you going to do, and even if you decided that you wanted to have an abortion, we would tell you that the moment you decide to step on that table, there's a part of you that would say, I can't do this. And that part of you that says, I can't do this, is the spirit part of yourself that says, I made a promise in the spirit world to bring forward this child. Now, does it mean that you will bring forward this child for yourself? It may not be. It may be that you're birthing this child for a sibling, or you're birthing this child for a woman in another town that needs to have a baby because it's her job. She's bonded with that baby in the spirit world. And that gives an expansion. That gives a crossover into a new dynamic. It mixes the thought forms that we have. It mixes the emotions we have. And so we share in birth, giving a child a way to find their way here, to maybe a mother that is not able to carry a child, but who has agreed to go through this kind of lesson for the mother who has a baby and the father who didn't want a baby, and so on, you know. It's too much to explain to you now in all the different scenarios, but we're sure you can sit and contemplate just how many stories one could write about circumstances when a woman is pregnant. But let's go back to the idea of the abortion. It must also be understood that often it might be that a woman gets pregnant temporarily for a vehicle of connection with their spirit guide. I personally was raped, and when I woke up, I said, "What are you doing?" I'd been given booze and drugs and so on. I won't bore you with my boring story, but it was typical of women of those times. And I screamed and yelled, "Get off me and leave me alone." And he was telling me I told him that he could, and I didn't remember a thing. Here my voice is cracking. My spirit guides let me come in back to me, just me, to talk about this, because I want you to see that no matter what we do, it's still in our voice, it's in our throat, it's in our body, it's in our memory. Our brain knows what we've done. So for me, I was very upset, and the man was not careful, and he was a friend of mine's husband. I didn't expect that. I thought I could trust him. So my foolishness at the time, and I'm not telling you the whole story, you can read my book, Pro-Life, Pro-Choice, Pro-Spirit, and you'll learn more. But what I want you to understand is that my choice to lose that baby was in a time where there was no abortions, nothing was legal, nobody would have supported me. I was the daughter of a reasonably middle-class family, but an ancestry of upper class, brought up with traditions. What could I do? I couldn't disgrace my family. So the abortion was my only choice. And I'm talking, spirit guides, where are you? Sister Teresa always talked to me, where are you? No voices, no sounds, nothing. And into my life came a new flatmate, roommate. And I was crying, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I told her, and she said, "Oh, I can help you. I can get you some pills." Really? The pills worked. And I was so grateful. It wasn't far gone. Anyway, after that, Sister Teresa was there. I'm like, where are you? You didn't talk to me. And she said, "I was inside you. I had to bond with you on a greater level so that you would go on to help women in this world. I will be with you all the time now to direct you, teach you." And she did. And she is still with me. But now I'm 80 years old, and so I just had my birthday yesterday. And so you can see that I have learned a great deal to appreciate myself as a woman, and to take care of my body as a woman, and to understand through the pain and suffering of the marriages, the children that I actually birthed, to see the entrapment that women put themselves in. Yes, I've been married 3 times. I'm now a widow. But I wish you to understand that all 3 marriages were not the best of marriages. There were issues, there were problems that the men brought into my life. And while I was grateful for their presence in my life to motivate me and stimulate me to grow and evolve, I have to say, without them, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. So I wish you to understand that I'm not just speaking from the pulpit. I have walked that pathway. My second loss of a baby was a boyfriend that said he loved me, and I allowed him to make me pregnant, and in that I had to have a backstreet abortion. And I can tell you It was so painful I couldn't handle it. But I'd been a nurse and I knew things. And so I made sure that I would lose that baby. But what I didn't know, and this was another lesson for me to understand this, was that this baby was at the end of the first trimester. I had a butterfly feeding there. I thought I was 2 months. Obviously I was 3 months. So when that baby came away, I went through normal birthing. It hurt. And I was holding a tiny little baby in my hand, and I said, what have I done? And I can understand how all of you mothers would say how bad you were to do that. But when I'd lost that baby, I sat with my spirit guides and I said, why didn't you tell me I was further along? Why didn't you know, and all this kind of thing? And they said, because you had to see both sides of the point. You lost a baby, which is hardly anything, and you lost a full baby at 3 months. The quickening had occurred only 2 days before. And I said to my spirit guides, well, what does that spirit who's just been birthed through me dead think? And then the next thing I saw this beautiful aura and this beautiful young man, because the baby was a boy, this beautiful young man, fully developed, standing in front of me with all the light shining, and he's saying, thank you, thank you. And I'm like, well, what did I do? I did something destructive, because I was in that mode in those days. And he said, no, I needed to come into your body to clear out a death scenario. In my last life, I killed myself. And so I didn't appreciate my life. So I needed to live the death struggle again. Thank you, because I now have completion. I'm like, wow, you know. There is so much we don't understand about spirit's connection. That young man went on to be a spirit guide with one of my sons. And it's only now that my son, I'm not giving away anything here, I want it to be private because I haven't told him yet, but that particular boy is awakening now because it's not been right for earlier years. So we'll see what happens in time as he brings his energy to my real son I birthed later. So you can see that there is much more here than you can understand. In the book Pro-Life, Pro-Choice, Pro-Spirit, you will see how I listened to lectures in the spirit world about the spirit and involvement at that time. You'll see how they tell stories of other situations where babies have come into the world and then had a cot death and passed on, because the spirit does not have intention to stay. So you'll understand more bit by bit that every woman who makes a choice to lose a baby is doing exactly what she's supposed to do, because she is helping a spirit in the spirit world to either clean up some history from past lives or prepare for another life that they're going to have in the future, or to allow a spirit guide to really bond with that person because they know they're going to work diligently with them throughout their life, which was the case for me with Sister Teresa. Okay, so now I've shared my little side of the story and how I learned about the power of spirit in embodiment. I'm also going to now talk about Petri babies. Yes, in the late 70s, 1970s, the first baby was, egg was fertilized in a Petri dish and put in the womb of a mother. And people often said, oh, this is not religious, this is not, and so on. The baby was born a little earlier, but we were looking at astrology in those days. And we did readings on how this baby would be if we talk about the day the Petri dish, the egg was fertilized, and the day the baby was put in her womb. And then we did one on astrology when the 3 months was up. And in those days, of course, I knew about this because I'd gone through my own thing I just mentioned to you. And so my friend and I, we sat and I channeled the astrology, he worked out the charts, and time went by, and after a few years, it's hard for me to remember how many, but maybe 5 or 6 years, the woman wrote and told us that it was from the quickening that this child, the reading that I did from the quickening, from astrology, of where the planets were when the baby was joined by the spirit in the womb, that the child grew up to have the characters and personalities under the influence of those planets. So we had proof again of what the spirit was not in the petri dish when they put the sperm with the egg. The spirit was not in the mother when they put it in the womb. It was the mother who grew that egg, who allowed that egg to attach to her womb, and she gave her lifeblood and all her food and everything to help that baby grow according to the DNA, the RNA of her life, her DNA of her husband or the man who gave her the sperm, and the RNA of his life is in that sperm. And so that baby's character and personality was from the ancestors of mother and father in the DNA and RNA of the baby as it grows in her womb. And then when the baby quickens, the spirit comes in at the end of that trimester and bonds with it, that spirit awakens the ceremonies that they've had in the spirit world with the prior ancestors of father and mother, and that baby is then accepted as quickening, and the mother carries that baby to term, hopefully. But what if she births the baby and she passes on and the baby lives? Or what if both parents are in a car and they're killed in an accident and the baby lives? Then it could be that the grandma or one of the family members, sibling, there's a variation on the theme here of the very many ways it could be, to even being adopted, could be taken on. And just know this, that the spirit of that child has been prepared for that to happen and is expecting that to happen because they're meant to be with someone else. And they're meant to be with someone else for the purpose of their getting the coding from that someone else to help them evolve for the future that is going to be growing in a new direction and purpose. So that child is born with a spiritual coding for the future that they have learned from their spirit guides and bonded with all their spirit guides in the oneness. So when I talk about myself, my very first experience out of body when I was 4 was to meet in a club. I was not looking for this. I didn't plan this. I've written about it in my life story, my journey into the oneness, where I came out of body because I was watching a lightning in the sky through my mother's window. I fell asleep, I guess. I came out of body and I was standing at a clearing with a black man beside me. And he took my hand. I was sucking my thumb, and he took my hand, and as I walked towards what I now know as a Creole, and there were other black people around there, I was looking at them and wondering at first as a child, black people, I've never seen black people before. And then by the time I got to the Creole, I was no longer a child, I was an adult, and I had a black skin. And I knew that the man I was with was Zoroaster, And so we sat, and I was reprogrammed with that memory of him and the spirit world and all that kind of thing. And I was there for 3 days, so I knew. And then he took me back to the edge of the clearing, and I became a child again. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in my body, and I thought, oh, I've been away from Mummy for 3 days. So I got off the bed and I ran into the kitchen where she was. I said, Mummy, I'm sorry, I was away for 3 days. I was with this black man. And she's looking at me and she's, darling, you've only been asleep for 10 minutes. And then she said, black man, never mind, did you have a bad dream or something? And I remember that. I said, no, he was talking to me, and I got black skin too. And she thought it was, vivid imagination. And she said that for many years, right? So I didn't forget it. I remembered it. It was important I remembered it. So here I want you to understand that even when we are born, and even when we are in a spirit consciousness, we can leave our body. So it's the same in the womb. A baby will come and go. Not the baby, the spirit of the baby will come and go. And so during that time, the mother thinks, oh, the baby's not moving, it's very quiet and must be dozing or sleeping. And sometimes they may be missing for days and they don't get any movement. And it's like, oh, I'm worried my baby's still alive. Well, just take a note from my experience that you come out of body, your spirit comes out of body in the womb. Who wants to be, as it were, in a smoky room before you're ready to actually be born? So the spirit goes back to the spirit world and gets refreshed and stays pure and sweet and nice. Especially if the mother's doing drugs or having arguments with dad all the time and she's upset and so on. The spirit will leave. Or on the other hand, they may stay when she's in a mood and leave when she's calm. So it could be the opposite. So you see, there's a great deal going on with our spirit during the pregnancy. And we don't remember that we're out of body while we're being carried by our mother. But we do know as we grow up and get older, I don't fit in with this woman and everything she says all the time. I feel different from her. I feel like I have to turn to someone else for help and guidance. And that's when they start looking for people who can be sort of uncles and aunts, who can be kind and run away and get some comfort and nurturing from other members of the family or strangers. And in that way, they're using another part of their spirit which has made a connection with other fragments of their soul group. And so they have this feeling like, I've always known you and I just want to be with you and you seem to understand me and you seem to get me. And these are soul members in the oneness that you've bonded with to meet in your life, to work with them throughout your life, or just 1 or 2 days just to set you on a pathway to go in the right direction. So you see, there's so much going on with your spirit in your body once you're born. And the people you think you have to be with forever may well be taken away from you. But ultimately, you find yourself and you find the other people you've bonded with in your soul group. And they come together with you in physical form and you do something. It might be that you simply arrange for a load of kids at school to go on a trip somewhere so they all have a wonderful day's outing. And you think, oh, that was hard work and we had to fight the system and but you're a pioneer here with others setting up circumstances. Now that I've used that as an example, realize that the spirits of the children born today from around 1990 all the way to current now, coming in, are pioneers in the Aquarian age to change the world and make it a better place. So there are a lot of mothers who are having babies who are very different, who will not listen to their mother saying, when I was your child age, we did this and we did that. Okay? They don't want to hear that because they're not interested. They know what you did, this and that. They've been watching you and 7 generations back, doing whatever you've been doing, and they're watching for a reason. They want to see that is bad, that didn't work, that was not good, we need to change that, we want to have this, oh, I've got an idea in adapting this. And they're all talking about it up there in the oneness, if you want to think of it, or the oneness behind you, and another dynamic, a vibration that you can't hear or see, watching you. You might feel them using psychometry and say, oh, there's a spirit in the room. But why are they there? They're watching what you're up to. They're watching if you're growing. Or maybe they're watching you to protect you from your own foolishness. You'll never know for sure, but you'll know in your sleep, because they'll talk to you while you're sleeping. And you will go out of body sometimes when you're sleeping and go to the spirit world. And when you come back in the morning, you have these weird dreams that something's crashing or something's changing. And sure enough, in the days and weeks to come, you see yourself changing. You're adapting. You're becoming different. So your spirit coding that's in your soul vibration comes into you, with you, into the body. In other words, you bring it, and while your brain is growing in your mother's womb, you're not there. You've just given the program to the baby to grow the womb in the thought of who you are and what you're doing. And you're doing that through your connection. So it's almost like you come and go from your mother's womb, and you give her a bit of you and leave, give her a bit of you and leave. And that's in the brain and the way it's growing. So once the brain is grown and the body is grown, then the spirit can fully take up residence. But before that, it's a coming and going, a sharing of bits and pieces according to what the soul coding is in that baby, and the bonding of what the mother's soul coding is with that baby in the womb in the second and third trimester. So I hope that you'll give this some thought now that you've heard me talking about this, and realize that when men come into the world, here's my throat chakra again, when men come into the world and tell you that they're going to give you your cake and eat it, as it were, and you're not being careful and cautious about being pregnant, so you do get pregnant, recognize first of all that you've done this to yourself for a reason. It might be to connect with your spirit guide. It might be self-worth and self-value issues. It might be that you are meant to have that baby, but you won't keep it. It might be that you're having that baby, but you'll find that baby is abnormal, and you're going to learn lessons through that. There's 101 scenarios it could be. Okay? But when you decide to let that man into your life and into your bed, you are setting yourself up for an experience. And that experience, whatever it is, will develop with you on your own, eventually making a choice to lose that baby. But no, it wasn't on your own, because you have connected with the spirit that is helping you to bring that man to you. Your man is connecting with you in your body, some of his energy through the soul structure coding of his body when you get pregnant, some of his memories and associations of fear and so on. So a lot of babies have their father's coding, but they never even met their father when they're born, and they don't want to. But they have the characteristics of the DNA of his ancestors, because they've been watching that. I want you to understand there is no situation that you can rationalize about where you can say there is no lesson going on. You just have to understand that whatever you do about your pregnancy is a lesson for everyone on earth and everyone in the spirit world, as well as all your ancestors who've lived and slaved away in the past to learn by watching you and what you do. So on that note, I want you please to think about yourself and your life, do a bit of homework, sit down. You may have had abortions already. Stop and think about who the man was, how did you let him into your life, how has he affected you, how have you changed as a result of him, how have you changed as a result of the abortion, What did it do for you at that time? Did you get stimulated? Were you more miserable? Were you poor me? Were you great freedom me? What was going on? Don't waste the time of losing your baby, because it's valuable. If you lost a baby not by abortion but by natural premises because of your health or because of anything, it's no different. The story's the same. Okay? You've bonded, you're learning something. What have you taken away from that, losing that child by natural situations? Okay? It's no different from losing that child by choice. What have you got out of it? How have you evolved? How have you grown? And how are you going to use that in your life to be useful and helpful to others? For me, my baby scenarios, not only the 2 I lost, but the 4 I birthed, there is always an understanding that those children are also a big influence in my life, because I met them in the spirit world and I did discuss or whatever that we were going to learn and teach them, and everyone has a way of doing that. And each one of my children has their own soul coding, and so my relationship with them is not the same as with another child. We're different. We integrate in different ways. So you can't treat all the living children in the same way. You can have your rules and regulations, but you've got to be adaptable, because their spirit, their soul is looking at you through new eyes, their eyes at you, but differently from the eyes of their siblings. So you can't control them and you can't control yourself. You have to be flexible all the way through your life. You have to let the dark and the light keep challenging you till you find that peace. And when you do, that's when the joy of life begins. Well, I'm 80 now. I have to be honest and say I didn't really get the unity and peace all the way through my life. I was learning, so I was walking into every sort of negativity you can think of. I've worked with prostitutes, I've worked with women in low countries, I've travelled to 19 countries, I've taught women all over the world, and slowly I used to wonder, why am I never getting men in my classes? But just lately we're getting more and more men, because they're finally coming around. They're the 40-year-old generation. They're coming around to, I'm a daddy at home, my wife is working. Yes, we can see those swapped relationships. And the final thing I want to say here is realize that the man that stays at home is a good father, was once a woman too. We do change sex from life to life. So we've all lived as men, we've all been to war and killed and yelled and screamed with a sword, and we've all born babies in the past in different cultures, in different countries, and so we all know one another very well. We just have amnesia while we're in embodiment, because we need to be blinded by our blind faith, or we need to be led by someone who wants us to change our point of view and be a dichotic energy to change, or we're someone that's coming with, hey, I don't fit into anything you're doing because I'm a pioneer in the future. Look back at your pioneers. I love to use Edison as one. He and several other people at the time were all trying to make light. And he wasn't the first, but he happened to be the one that was the greatest for being remembered. What would he think if he walked down the main street in Las Vegas at all those lights, the strip? What would he think? What would he feel? Well, in the oneness, you could go into the halls of learning and find him and talk to him and find out, and then maybe come back in another life where you're talking about one big light bulb that lights up a whole city. Wouldn't that be good? But it doesn't mean it can't happen, because if you can think of it, it can be made. And the oneness can create anything. And we are all a fragment of the oneness. And I learned that when God spoke to me in my hallway, where I was supposed to be getting a rag or something from my mother to wipe my new sister who just arrived home that day. So I know a lot about what happened that day. And God said to me, you are a child of God. You will know great suffering, and you will help those that suffer. And I have. And so when I got to be 60, I finally realized that all that suffering I'd been through, and with all the people and the women of all the world that I've been helping and teaching, I could finally now bring in the men. And I've been working quite a lot with men lately. They're seeking guidance, just like the women were. Who am I? Why am I here? Why am I enjoying being a home daddy rather than having a job at work? And we're doing that. We're explaining things. So, take a long look at the rules and regulations that so-called leaders make for us and recognize that whether it be priest, lawyer, doctor, or capitalist, to different religions, all right, spirits wanting to come back in. The politics, I couldn't find the word. The politics of the world are being shifted right now, and it is coming about because of COVID and because of Russia and Ukraine and because of China's lack of ability to organize themselves. These great powers are tumbling down, and America must become the first country to unify. And by unification we mean to become a living example of applying all skills, all talents on homeland to rebuild this land, so that you can show of the world that there is a way for people of all nations to congregate in one place and together unify to rebuild one land, so that all peoples are fed, clothed, educated and nurtured in their belief systems as equal beings who throng together in joyful events to either work or play, leaving an example for the rest of the world to follow. So put down your guns, pick up your hoe and shovel, and go forward and build and create greatness. We say to you of the world now, the things that you think you have, such as gas problems, will not be a problem in another 20 years. For you are already learning that sound is the next vehicle of power. Sound is friction. We are of the Spirit, and we are of you. And so we take you to understand that friction creates form. Form is useful. Use it well. Manifest new things. Create new ways of living. Build communities. Live in harmony. Put down your anger, your rage. Use that energy as pushing energy, movement energy, dynamic energy to create and build a world of peace. Enough said from me, Cornelius Tacitus, and others who have been with us. We are appreciative of your listening, and we hope that you will share this to others who are seeking advice, inspiration. It is important that your world begin to understand that mankind's consciousness through religion is wrong. We understand you need religion, but make it a mellow one. Take away the dominance, take away the aggression, and open up the love and joy of divine presence in each of you to congregate in peace and harmony, in prayer of loving all and accepting all and becoming one with everyone you meet for a minute or a year or a century. We say, be loving, giving, and of all things, at peace in self. If you are warring with yourself, I can and I can't, I will and I won't, I shall and I shan't, it is and it isn't, then you are not in peace, you are not in harmony, you are not a living, walking example of the oneness. Work for that. Work together. Bond together. If you need more churches and more temples and more synagogues and the like, then let them be a community place of sharing peace. For there is no reason why all religions cannot be together in one combined energy. You have too long used it as separation tool to divide, and you have plundered and killed in the name of God. And we say, enough, please, enough. It is time now, with the new generations coming, where we will not fight for religion or battle for tools, but will ask for conversations and for support and for nourishment and for understandings of all peoples. So on this note we say, I am all that you are, and you are all that I am. So we are no different. We are one and the same. And life is choice. You are a drama. Let it be that you act your part in the play well. And so it is. Thank you for listening. Okay, Cornelius always likes to have his last say. I thank you too for listening, and I hope you will share it. He asked for that, so please do. Take care. Bye-bye.